Hi, everyone, and welcome to 2023 Recruitment Trends webinar. I hope everyone had a great start to your day. And yeah, in this webinar, we will discuss 5 key trends that we identified in our recruitment trends report that we released not too long ago. I hope you have downloaded it. If you haven't, we'll definitely send it after this webinar. So we're going to go through these trends and what those essentially means for your organization and how you can use these trends to maximize your talent acquisition efforts. And here to help me, I have 2 of my amazing colleagues to help me navigate these trends and how you can utilize these when you get back to work after this webinar. So we have Karin Bergström, our VP People and Culture. And we have our amazing partner manager, Albin Mannberg, to join us today. How are you guys?
Doing great. I was also like, what is your last name, Albin?
Yeah, for a second, I was like, it's Mannberg, yes.
Yeah. I'm doing great. Yeah. I'm actually, it's a positive sign that spring is in the air. I had to take down the curtains. If not, I would have the sun like in my face right now. So
that's a horrible problem to have.
Yeah, exactly. Horrible.
Yeah. And it's amazing here too, like meetings. So getting to know a lot of new partners, and just had a meeting before this, so it was super in a rush, but we made it.
Living on the edge.
Yes.
Amazing. So before we kick off, I was initially going to ask you to do a quick introduction for everyone who doesn't know you, but I thought we do it all the time and I see it all the time, so I thought it would be fun to ask something a little bit different for people to get to know you in a different, more personal way. So I was going to ask you both, what is the best advice you've ever been given?
Oh, Karin, you start.
Thank you, Albin. Oh, that's a tough one. Wow. Actually, it's funny because it's, I guess, related to my job in some sense. It's listen more than you speak. Maybe not the best thing to say before a webinar when the only thing I'm going to do is speaking, but it's something I have in mind a lot since I've been working with recruitment for quite some time. And yeah, I think that's the advice that I try to bring with me in everything I do. Yeah.
Amazing. I love that.
And I have to quote our CEO on this. RF, is my sort of role model here at Jovalon. And whenever I'm supposed to do something and ask for permission, he says it's better to apologize than ask for permission. So it's the way to go.
Yes.
But as Karin said also, it's good to listen, but yeah.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you guys for sharing. So if you have any questions throughout this whole webinar, feel free to use the chat function. I'm pretty sure it's in the bottom and in the middle. So anytime you have ideas, thoughts, something you'd like to share, something you'd like to ask our participants here today, shoot. And we'll also have a quick Q&A session at the end where you're free to ask anything. So just a quick summary so we know what's coming throughout this next 45 minutes. So today we're going to dive into these 5 key trends, whereas the first one is how the progressing recession will affect the way we approach our employer branding efforts. The second one we're going to dive into is the evolvement. I know we talk a lot about remote work and it's been in the forefront for the past couple of years. And what we're going to discuss today is how that's going to keep on evolving in 2023. The third one is the growing need to prioritize internal mobility. The fourth one is the crucial employee engagement in the new world of work. And the fifth but not least is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and how we can implement that in our, and make sure that penetrates our entire organization. So before we dive into the exciting conversation, for anyone who doesn't know Jobelon or aren't familiar with Jobelon yet, we are a modern and user-friendly talent acquisition platform used by mid-sized and enterprise companies worldwide, such as McDonald's and Capgemini, for example. So what we basically do is that we help streamline their entire recruitment processes and provide a standout candidate experience. And obviously, we love to talk about everything related to HR and talent acquisition, which is exactly what we will be doing today. So let's dive into the first trend. So generally, during times of economic instability, companies tend to be heavily focused on reducing their costs, which in the world of recruitment can, and we've seen it as well during these past couple of months, weeks, can result in layoffs, permanent hiring freezes, and potentially an increased demand for temporary workers. But even though we're undergoing times of less active hiring, companies still need to find a way to maintain and ensure that their brand remains, their employer brand remains competitive. So first, I just wanted to dive a little bit deeper in why. Why is it important that we make sure to maintain our employer brand and ensure that our company remains competitive even during turbulent times? Do you have any thoughts on that, Karin?
Yeah, I do. First of all, super interesting question, or I'm very passionate about this topic because I think we can all agree that having a strong employer brand is a must-have for companies to be able to attract talents. I think we all know that, but just as you were mentioning, during a recession, the challenge to attract top talent, it can be even more difficult, as talent today might not be as keen on jumping ships because of the uncertain times we're living in. So I think we do not only need to maintain our employer brand, we need to push ourselves and challenge ourselves to actually develop it and enhance it further. So I think during the uncertain times that we're living in, perhaps we have also more time to spend on this. So if you look at your employer brand, this is kind of, for me at least, is the same as working with your culture, because your brand never sleeps. So even though most companies today might pause recruitment a bit, hold for it for a while, it's as important to continue building your brand. If you compare it to culture, I mean, you would never stop with the different initiatives that you do to promote and engage your employees and work with your culture, and same goes with your brand. So I would say, like, your brand never sleeps, and you should definitely think big and not only maintain it, but challenge it, because it will also give you a competitive edge looking at your business. So I think that's also a final thing that I think is important to highlight, that it's not only about attracting talents, retaining talents, it's also about how can you be on the front line when we're hopefully soon on the other side of this recession. You will have a competitive edge if you do not rest.
I absolutely agree, and slow times in general, no matter if it's organizational wise or personal wise, let's say for a vacation, it's a great time to evaluate your life, just as a recession is a great time to evaluate your employer brand and the function of it, and how we can, you know, turn it into something even stronger and even more powerful, and see where we're lacking. So I think it's a great opportunity to make sure that we are aligned organizational wise as well. So yeah. So in terms of employer branding, like we know it's important, right? But how do we modify the efforts that we already have and make sure to take advantage of the opportunities that a recession can provide.
Yeah. So like Karin spoke a lot about like culture and values and all of that stuff. And in a like more marketing world, like the employee brand is connected to you internally and externally. So like, first of all, I would just like say, have a clear structure of your values and your employee brand internally before you start pushing it out externally. Because if you don't have everything on point, like in the campaigns that I work with, if we at Jobalon, for example, could create the world's best recruitment campaign and lead them into a job ad. But if the employee branding isn't in the actual job ad itself, like we will only lead hundreds and hundreds of talents into a job ad that's not good. So which meaning it's only a waste of money for the companies buying campaigns, for example.
Right.
Yeah. And the same way goes for like, you can also create the world's best job ad, which means you have the campaign, you have the job ad, everything is on point. But if you aren't clear on your values and your culture, and a talent then goes into a recruitment process, then they will see through all the BS, if you can say so. And like it will totally just be a waste of money and an even harder talent to attract in the end.
Yeah, and it's interesting because HR is we talk a lot about the merge of HR and marketing, and how e-commerce is becoming more recruiters are taking a lot of inspiration from how e-commerce and how the consumer experience works. And I love that, because you're creating these expectations of, oh, you're creating this, job ad, and it sounds like the best company in the world to work for, and all these perks and all these, you're like, wow. And then you go into the interview phase and you get to meet the people that actually work there, and you get to see the office and the energy there, and it's not aligned with how you portrayed the brand to begin with. So I love that point of like, it has to be aligned from the first interaction with your brand to the moment you start working for that company, and when you're they are there for 2 years, 5 years, 6 years. So it's like, it's a never ending cycle that needs to be aligned no matter what.
And it's even more important now in the recession, when fewer people actually change jobs. Always gotta look out for it, and as Karin said, develop it.
Definitely. So from a marketing point of view, what risk do you see if companies are not promoting their values and their behaviors? Like, do you have any concrete examples of how you can promote them when working with your employer brand?
Yes, of course I do.
Of course.
Of course.
Amazing.
No,
Shoot.
but like it can't be like you just stop with the employer branding, because when the recession is over, you will have such a high mountain to climb in the end if you just stopped everything. And something, I've been in the HR space for 7 years, met hundreds and hundreds of different employers, and talking about the importance of employer branding. And last Friday we had a small event with RecPro, and they said that like 10 years ago it was super cool to have a career page. If you look at today's like job market, if you don't have a career page, you're basically out of business. Like, it's such a crucial thing to have in today's market. And when I met all of these different like companies, everyone knows like now it's super important to have. But the number one thing that everyone says is like, yeah, but we don't have a dedicated person to do like the employer branding. And they're like, we will just push it for later. But now when we come into a recession, they need to like realize how much they need to work with it. So my role here today is basically to give ideas of what you potentially could post on social media, and other channels just to keep up with your employer brand. And if we take like Jobalon for example, let's say we're going to create an amazing employer brand around us. First of all, you need to map out your values. So at Jobalon, we have passion for people, passion for product, and passion for business. And an example month of or a year would be like, take these 3 key values and have one theme every single month. So let's start with passion for people, for example. Then I would just commit super easy, like post once or twice every single week, and just talk about something that's regarding the people, the employees at your workplace. And something that Karin challenged us with is like these small questions that we always need to think about and evaluate how we work with it. And one of them are, I contribute to a trusting environment where colleagues feel safe to be themselves by showing confidence and appreciation in other Jobalonians' competence. And like that is like so many pieces of content to just push out. And one thing of how you can do it is you as a manager or you as an employer branding person, you just go out in your workplace and you ask, like, for example, the person who's been there the longest and the shortest, or like, what's the best thing with Jobalon, for example, to work with it. And it doesn't matter how they respond. It only matters that they respond, because probably they'll have 2 different sides of it. And then you can talk about that, like, why do someone who's been here for 4 years talk about it in this way, while someone who's only been here for like a week talk about it in this way. And Friday, a few days later, you can just summarize it and create another post, an article or a reel or Instagram carousel or whatever it could be.
Yes. And it's interesting because that's the thoughts of the workplace. We obviously want our employees to tell that story for us and tell their truth about how it's like, and that's very subjective. Obviously, everyone who works at a company has a different experience. So in terms of conveying that message, I want to bring this in because it's something that is very talked about in worldwide, but also in the HR field. What about OpenAI? Like, is that cheating to get some help from AI in order to write a job ad or in order to work with your employer brand? I mean, you're sitting with one of our biggest customers and helping them with their employer brand. Like, what are your ideas and thoughts on getting a little bit of help from OpenAI when working with your employer brand?
Also quoting Sensei RF, if there's another way to do it, do it. Like, save time, be more efficient, like, do shit better if it's a better alternative. So like OpenAI, I've been digging into that since it launched like in December, and it's helped me with like so many ideas, campaign texts, like spawning anything, like when we're doing campaign texts in Finnish. Like, sure, we have our colleagues from Finland, but they're in a different section. But then we can just write a campaign text in Sweden and ask AI to translate it and make it a bit more creative. And then like have the specific text, send it out to our Finnish colleagues, and they will just look it through. So it looks amazing. And regarding to the employer brand, like 12-month plan, you could just go into OpenAI and said, oh, this is our company. We are this many. We work in this industry. Like, create an employer branding game plan for us, and like it will give you a perfectly good one. And then you can just tweak it a bit, like, okay, we don't want to talk about this, but we could talk about this. Then it will just pre-write everything. And yeah, like, if you can do it, do it. That's my recommendation.
So that's Albin's words. I'm super interested also for everyone who's tuning in, what your thoughts on OpenAI is and how you're using it, if you're using it. But for sure, I mean, it's revolutionizing the way we work, no matter in what field and function. So that's definitely an upcoming webinar that we should have for sure. So to move on to the next question. So how do we best demonstrate to future or current candidates that our organization do offer stability and is a secure option?
Yeah, if we look at this question, and if I had to pick one thing that, at least for me, is super important to think about when we first of all work internally with creating trust, stability. I mean, of course, you need to start there to then be able to promote this externally to candidates. What I want to mention here is try to create a culture where self-leadership can flourish. So when I talk about self-leadership, it involves goal setting, like clear goal settings, taking ownership, and that the employees feel that they can always develop and learn. Like those three things are, at least for us at Jobelon, super important. So if there's like two things that I would do to start like engage these type of activities, the first one is something I guess a lot of companies do, which is like structured one-on-ones, but like make sure that they're actually structured, again connected to goals. It's very common, I see in a lot of companies, that perhaps they have one-on-ones, they sit down with their employees, but perhaps managers are not fully trained in like how do you actually work together with the employees to set clear goals, because again that's super important to create stability and engagement. And also one thing that I think is more and more popular, if you look at the training and development part, is that you can invest in things like high potential programs. That's just like the summarizing word for it. It can all, of course, be different type of programs, but it could be a high potential program where you actually involve different mentors. For example, a job line could be mentors within the HR tech business to promote our employees to develop even further. So I think, clear goal settings with one-on-ones and having those type of training initiatives like high potential programs is two things that you actually can start doing today if you don't have that in place. Because if you have that, you will create trust, and you will hopefully be able to also, if you look externally, promote that to candidates in a recruitment process, for example. So that will help you boost stability. Summarize it.
Yeah, like starting from the inside out. And
yeah,
I love that you mentioned self-leadership as well, because it's especially in the new world of work, where candidates, actually that's the next slide we're going to jump into in terms of remote work and how we do it in a successful way, and making sure that our employees and our workers, that they feel safe and secure, because that will reflect the employer brand essentially. Because if not, we will end up in the loop that Albin was talking about, that we portray the amazing, workplace with these amazing features and perks and all of that, and then they actually start working at the company and it's a completely different experience. So great advice, start from the inside out.
Yeah.
So let's jump into the next one. So I assume that people out there are like, can we stop talking about remote work? Like, we've done it for a couple of years now. But as a matter of fact, it's still something that is in the forefront for at least employees. And according to a report by, I'm pretty sure it was CNBC, they said that 64% of employees worldwide never want to return to the office, at least full time. And they, as a matter of fact, said that I'd rather go look for a new employer that would allow me to work remotely rather than staying. So even if these past couple of years has drastically changed, we've undergone a lot of changes worldwide, nonetheless in different organizations. We see the tech scene right now and everything that's going on there. How is remote work going to evolve in 2023, and how do we make sure that we like provide it in a way that's sustainable for us, but also how do we set strategies to remain a successful remote work in this year as well? Do you have any thoughts on that, Karin?
Yeah, it's actually funny because when I look at this slide, I mean, I think we maybe should stop talking about remote, that word, and start talking about flexibility instead.
Yeah.
It's like remote is so much more than just, okay, are you working from home or not? So one of the strategies that almost kind of is a slogan at Jobbalon that we strongly believe in is that like a remote or a flexible way of working that's definitely here to stay. And it's all about like how can we make sure that we create an environment where each and every individual can maximize their potential? So we have built our whole team with the belief that, again, it's not only allowing you, Sofia, to work from Barcelona or not, but how we can help you in, again, like one-on-ones and career mapping, etc., to make sure that you feel ownership and that you can thrive in your role. And we're all different. So I think the individualistic perspective that, I mean, it's been around for quite some time now, I think that it will be more of that and more about the flexible type of trends that we see in the work today.
Definitely.
And Sofia, maybe you can just speak for yourself. I mean, you're working from Barcelona today, but just a couple of months ago you were in Bali. So, and obviously it works.
Yeah, I think actually something that you touched on before in terms of self-leadership, I think that when it comes to remote or flexible working, it obviously it's equal to having taking more ownership and having more responsibility over yourself and your, like, no one is gonna tell you to go to work when you're working from home. So like going to an office, like you're going into a working environment, it takes a certain level of self-leadership in order to lead yourself. So I think it's a great segue into definitely a good strategy in terms of making sure that workers feel comfortable working for themselves, no matter if they're in an office or working from any location in the world. So yeah, I pretty much took flexibility and I was like, let's do it in the most hardcore way ever. So, but I would definitely say self-leadership is a big one. And also making sure, like, so at Jobbalon, for example, we do have people working from different time zones, from different continents, from different countries, and how do we ensure that we remain that sense of belonging and a sense of culture? And one thing that we talk a lot about is like culture isn't always born within four walls. Like culture is a shared experience that can be shared no matter where you're located. So something that we do, for example, is making sure that we actually gather once in a while to make sure that we get to know each other more personally and get to hang out even outside of work hours. Karin, do you mind telling the audience a little bit more about that initiative? It's called Jaycation, but I'll leave it to that.
Yeah, it's basically that since we're very remote at Jobbalon, we try to make sure that at least one time per year we gather the whole team. We go to a crazy destination like South Africa we went to last time, and I think it's important, even though like as you say, you do not create a culture at the office, is it can definitely be done with the right tools digitally as well, but it's super important for us at least to have some FaceTime and meet up one time per year and work together from a certain spot. And I think it's also important here to mention that is definitely, I mean, a trend when people talk about remote work, but if you look at also research, because now we have research to look at since COVID. It was a couple of years ago now soon. So if you look at that, it actually tells us that higher flexibility is something that candidates actually prefer instead of high pay and more vacation days. I think, at least for me, that was interesting when I read about that. And again, it might not suit all companies. I'm not standing here saying that everyone should go fully remote or hybrid, but I think if you manage to like create a setup that actually works, it can have a huge impact. And also other numbers. If we look at like talent shortage, for example, we talk a lot about that today within the HR business, and 75% of companies today feel that there's a lack of talent out there. But at the same time, 97% of workers say that they would prefer some sort of remote working friendly alternative. So those two numbers combined, if you look at it, I think again a lot of companies could gain a lot with just like tweaking a couple of things. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go full remote, but it could, again, use the word flexibility perhaps instead of remote, and start there. That may make the process easier.
Definitely. And you touched on that a little bit in terms of the next question. When it comes to not remote flexibility, flexible options or solutions, they usually tend to focus on office-based workers. And I think that it kind of stems from the Corona, the pandemic, and how a lot of, or majority of office workers had to move from an office to a home-based one. So flexibility in a lot of people's eyes therefore tend to be connected to geographical flexibility. But how can we embrace flexibility in a more inclusive way that includes blue collar workers as well? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Interesting question, because it's easy that you get stuck in thinking about the workspace like in front of a computer. If you look at, for example, someone working at a warehouse, I mean, the whole remote thing is not really possible, but I think definitely is other things you can do here, again, related to like the sense of ownership, that perhaps you have a manager that is really good at listening in and being flexible when it comes to like work hours. It could be, again, your career. So yeah, I think definitely we need to like rethink the word flexibility and what it actually means, because again, I think to summarize it all relates to like building trust and that the employee feels ownership, and if they feel that, they can be flexible. For sure.
Yeah, and a lot of reports that have been conducted throughout this past couple of years have underlined the fact that when people talk about wanting more flexibility, it's obviously also in terms of geographical flexibility, but the first priority for people, for workers, is time-wise, to have a flexible schedule, to be able to maybe leave earlier in the afternoon. So it's not really based on the geographical spot that you're in or wanting that kind of flexibility. So yeah, I love that idea of like, let's look at it in a more broad way, and autonomy can mean different things for different people. So I see that time is just flying. So we have to jump into the third trend, which is it's time to prioritize internal mobility. And I also a report that we have in the report that we had in the report. That's a great sentence. We have a report from McKinsey in our recruitment trends report that says that 41% of employees that have resigned recently, they mentioned that the biggest reason for that was the lack of career advancement, along with uninspiring and uncaring leaders. And on top of that, we're living in a world where it is the candidates market, and the companies are having a harder time to fill open positions with workers with a similar skill set that the workers that left have. So it's harder to recruit, and candidates have more options than ever. So rather than hiring externally and focus on, attracting new talents, how do we make sure to tap into the talents that we already have, and make sure to fill existing roles or new available roles, and also just making sure that there's room for them to grow and advance in their career. But first, just a quick one. I like to do like the why before jumping into strategies. Like, why is internal mobility important, and why does that actually increase satisfaction and loyalty?
Yeah, I think we can talk for a long time about the benefits, but just in short, I mean, it's pretty clear that, I mean, if you focus and spend time and effort in internal mobility, it will hopefully save you some costs. You do not need to recruit, for example, in the same way. Perhaps you can actually challenge your talent acquisition team, or vice versa. I think talent acquisition should challenge managers to perhaps, okay, let's start looking at internally, like, do we have these resources in-house before we start a process, for example. And if you do so, if you, for example, train your managers in how you can have, again, these one-on-ones where you have a really clear idea, okay, Sophia, like, where do you want to be in 2 years? I think if you spend time and train your managers and having those type of conversations, because it's easy to say, but it's not always that managers have the skill sets to be able to do that. If you have that in place, I definitely believe that you will be able to improve your internal mobility, and that also will have a lot of benefits, such as, again, trust and the employees feeling that, okay, I could actually stay here for a long period of time. So I would say, yeah, 2 things, like, make sure to be able to work with your internal mobility, like train your managers, train your leaders. And also, final thing here that I think is super important is when you talk about, like, advancement at the company, like a career map. I remember when I started working with HR, it was a lot of employees that were like, okay, I need a career plan. I need to know exactly where I'm going to be in 2 years. And for most companies today, that is not possible. So one thing you can do here is more engage employees and get them involved in the strategies and, like, the vision of the company. Because if you do so, they will feel engaged, they will feel involved, and feel that they have aspirations that, okay, I can actually, if we're gonna reach this goal, I'm gonna find my way here.
I really like that, because if the vision is unclear, employees doesn't know where we're going, the road we're heading, it's hard to picture yourself being a part of that journey. So in terms of how do we get there? Like, how do we implement the successful internal mobility strategy? What are your ideas? It's something that we do at Jobland, something you've seen externally. What are your thoughts on strategies to reach that success in terms of internal mobility?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it a bit already, like, having in mind that you do not need to set a set, like, career path. It's more of a dialogue with the candidate, and again, focus on the vision and the business goals. And it could also be like the high potential programs that we see a lot of companies work with today, that you create mentors that could actually help you, like, improve your employees' skill sets in new areas. So there are actually up to date and could actually take on those new roles popping up.
And we have a great example of that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We talked about this before for this webinar, that actually talking about internal mobility, I just looked at myself and I realized, like, wow, okay, I had like 4 different roles at Jobland for a 3-year period of time, and that is all because of, again, this transparency that I've had with my manager. Because if he wouldn't have been transparent with me, like, you know, Karin, I think in like 1 year time we will start recruiting a lot, we will need an HR. If I didn't know about that, I wouldn't have been working at Jobland today, which is pretty cool. So I was just like, okay, I know that position or that area is actually going to be vital for Jobland. So that's how I like kind of mapped out my own career, just because of that.
Yeah, that's a great example, and the result of being transparent and having that transparent climate where you feel, you know, safe enough to share that like your current role might not be a good fit, and for your manager to be like, oh, there's actually, just like you mentioned before, of like sharing the roadmap of like, we will need this kind of competence in the future. So how do we package this and make sure that this is included in our employer marketing or employer branding efforts, and how do we make sure to convey that message to future candidates that this is a workplace where there are potential ability to advance in your career, there's potential for growth, and it's, I mean, still people are looking for a long-term option in terms of an employer. So Albin, do you have any ideas in terms of employer branding efforts and how to include that?
Yes, if check like Karin's transparency with like her manager, if that's something that we have internally, then we should definitely push it out in the exact same way, super transparent for future talents. And if we look at like Karin, for example, and just take what happened there, that's super good content to publish out in order to attract other talents. So for example, Karin did this. She tried something new. She went into an HR role from CSM. Like that, like as an employer branding manager, I would like run to Karin, ask her a few questions like, why did this happen? How, what's your like goals that you're focusing on a long time? And I would like take that and break it down into like 4 or 5 different pieces and just push it out on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, TikTok, do an article about it, run Google ads, and like push that out so you get data. Because like in my world, everything Karin speaks about is people, but for me, it's basically data. And when you ask like 4 different questions or create 4 different pieces of content, then you can see what talents like and what they don't like. And you can start like, okay, 3 of the 5 things that we talked about worked. So let's push more around the content that worked for like the next person who gets a promotion or whatever it could be. And in terms of like this flexibility, like creating content around that, for us, it could be like, oh, I'm getting a dog. So I need to work from home for 3 months in order to get this dog to become a real dog. Yeah, sounds super weird. But like, as someone who's in charge of the marketing, I would like call them, ask them like, how are you doing it? How are you managing a dog and work like at the same time, and start creating some stuff around that. You, Sophia, who moved to another city, like I would be super interested to like showcase other future talents, like how it is to move to another city but still work at the exact same company. And the like promotion part, let's say I get a promotion and I like attention, of course I will put it out on LinkedIn, so I will get like a lot of hoorays and likes and stuff like that. And you can even ask your manager to repost your promotion just to make it more like transparent, so it doesn't only come from me. But like all of this, like it's so important to like just do it. It doesn't have to be super good from the beginning. You will learn once you push out, and you will see what content talents like. And if you, for example, have a landing page or like a career page for future talent to subscribe to your work, like the more content that you push out, the more people will go into that career page and subscribe to your job. And maybe they won't apply right now, but in like it's the same way as following an account on Instagram, for example. like I can see them. I don't have to do anything super active. I can just see it's going well for this company, and maybe like in a few weeks I will start to like change my mind about like, oh, this company is actually pretty good. Maybe I'll send in an application when there's a good job for it.
I really like that, because it's also about building that trust. So when you passively following a company that you might be interested in working, you don't usually take action right away. You tend to see them in your feeds, and that creates that association of like, oh, this brand has dogs in the office. Oh, okay, and then you register that, and then you consume more and more content. You get more of an idea of that company, what it's like to work for them. And that essentially creates, hopefully, that interest of like, oh, I think that this will be a good match in terms of my values, and I think it's aligned with their values, and more powerful. So one thing that I really think is essential for anyone who works with employer branding is like, just let your employees speak for you. So sharing that Albin got a dog, it's so much more powerful if Albin shares what it's like to have a dog and work for Jobbalon than sharing, an automated post about it on LinkedIn. So really like letting your employees share their story, and that will in turn create that mirror effect of someone seeing themselves in Karin and being like, oh, I was in this situation previously in another company, and that creates that starts to create that kind of bond. So yeah, really, definitely good recommendations. So let's jump into our fourth trend, which is obviously more than a trend, is essential for culture and business overall. And we already entered a new world of work where the workforce extends beyond the traditional office, and has new ideas of what a successful or what a happy workplace is for them. And obviously, as we touched on before, flexibility plays a huge role in that, as well as retaining a healthy work-life balance, making sure to cultivate a meaningful workplace and a sense of belonging, no matter where you're located. And in order to keep people engaged, people and leaders essentially has to rethink and reset the ways they manage employee engagements. So I wanted to take a more of a macro focus on this, because we talked a lot about from our internal perspectives and things that we do at Jobbalon. But I wanted to talk more about worldwide and innovative activities and approaches that organizations have implemented to cultivate employee engagement and essentially created a more positive, transparent and healthy culture. So Karin, do you mind telling us a little bit about initiatives that you've seen throughout this past couple of years that inspired you?
Yeah, I love this question. It's super interesting, because we see a lot of our customers try out different things every day. And first thing that I want to mention here is, of course, there's a lot of different things to boost engagement that you can try out, but think about like what will actually boost your business. So everything, of course, doesn't work for all sizes of companies, etc. So start with that. But a couple of things that I noticed that I want to bring up here is first of companies allowing employees to choose number of paid vacation days. Is a pretty I wouldn't say common thing, but it's a thing we see more and more. And what's interesting with this this activity or this benefit, if you call it, is that of course it creates, or should perhaps increase the level of trust, because you give your employees free hands. Like we totally, again, self-leadership, we believe that you know best. If you need 40 vacation days, we're sure you will do your job. It's up to you to decide. And also, if you look at the world we're living in today with work-life balance, it will hopefully improve that as well. And another example that I think is interesting to look at is again related to flexibility, the 4 days work week. It's been a discussion in Sweden and I mean countries all over the world. And if you look at a couple of examples, a company that actually did this, for example, in Microsoft in Japan, they tried this out and they actually experienced, which I think was really, really cool, that 40%, they boost their productivity with 40%. After trying this out. So it didn't even stay the same. It actually, yeah, they got much more productive, which I think is amazing to see. And
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do
no,
it.
we need to do it from Jolan. And same thing, I know Iceland is really in the forefront here, trying this out and also looking at the different trials that they done. Very positive. So again, it might not work for all companies, but I think definitely, I mean, it might be something worth trying and look at the data and see, okay, could we actually boost the engagement? That would be amazing. And one final example that for all of you who watch the news and read the newspaper, I saw that Spain a couple of days ago, they had a new interesting suggestion that they wanted to offer employees leave for menstrual pain. So I know, I think like in Zambia, again, Japan, they already have that. So you could actually take, I think it's like 2 days or something like that, those days off, if you have these type of, menstrual pains for women, of course. So I think that's also like in the forefront, if you look at, I mean, equality, just to take one example, women should actually be able to take days off, and it should not be seen as like vacation days or sick days. This is something else. So yeah, those are just a couple of examples that I think is very inspiring to look at when you talk about employment engagement activities.
Definitely. And I think that reflects a lot of where we're at and what workers actually want. Like, this is a response to what people actually want from their workplace and want a more humanized approach to what it means to be working. And especially when it comes to the unlimited vacation days and 4-day work week. And that would actually be super interesting to see. I saw a few companies in Sweden as well who've just started it out and are in that, evaluation process of seeing, like, is this something that we will move forward with, or is something that actually isn't working for us? Because obviously it's individual for every company and the outcome of it. Something that you and I have talked about before, Karin, is so I interviewed Mindler last fall, and they have this initiative called Duvet Days, where they allow their employees to take, just as you're physically sick, sometimes they allow their employees to take days off if they experience some kind of mental health issues, such as anxiety or depression or of any sort. And I think also that's a great way of showing that, like, it's okay to be human, even if you're stepping into your professional self when you're working, because you're also a human underneath it all, obviously. So I love these initiatives and how they're like humanizing a more and more digital workplace.
Super interesting, and I would love to try to implement at least one of these at Joblo. Yeah,
let's see in a year when we do a review how far we've come. And
did you do? Yeah,
exactly. So I was thinking now, so all these, let's say that as a Jabalon implement all these incredible initiatives, how do we create ambassadors off of this? Like, how do we make sure our employees talk about these? And I was going to give this question straight to Albin, because you're an expert on how to convey beautiful employer branding messages.
Oh, so nice. Like it's just another like idea that we do. I don't know who came up with it, but it's a super good way of like, since we're growing and we want our employees to start recommending others. Like, if you're happy, like before we had this idea, it still worked. But with this idea, we've boosted it like a lot. So we want our employees to start recommending Jabalon for other companies. and we invented this leaderboard, or I'm sure we didn't invent it, but we stole the idea of a leaderboard where Karin is HR, and then we can have this leaderboard where I send a talent to Karin, and I will get 50 points. If that talent goes into an interview, I get another 300 points. Second interview, 500 points. And if an offer is sent, 500 points, etc. You get it. And then we can like start converting points into vacation days or like extra money. That's just one example. If we look at like hardcore marketing, then we have like merchandise. Like I've never won an actual backpack, for example. I really want a Jobelon branded limited edition backpack, but we have these internal competitions, and you can win it and you're super happy. But what you don't know is you're actually representing Jobelon when you're out walking in the street. And last night, me and RF sat and discussed like, okay, what else can we do in terms of merchandise? And he came up with this idea. I'm sure I shouldn't say it, but it's better to apologize than ask for permission. Like to have your shoes with the Jobelon logo under it. So you walk in the snow, you will basically brand the whole street from your footprints, basically. And like
let's make sure this temperature stays low. That's not melting.
And it works in Sweden.
But it works in Sweden.
Ideas like that, and it's not super necessary. Like if you have the values on point and everyone is happy, they will be more than happy to recommend your workplace to work in. But like this is just some small stuff in order to make it even better.
Absolutely. I had some follow-up questions, but I'm seeing that we're running out of time, so I'm just gonna not say them and jump into the to the last slide. So to begin with, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging it's important to acknowledge that it's not obviously a trend, and it must be at the forefront of our efforts at all times, and not especially, but we have new generations stepping into the workplace where this is on their priority list of what's important in their upcoming workplace. This is on the top list. So yeah, this is not a new initiative, but still a very important one. So if we look at, I know we only have a few minutes, but if we look at the hiring section of how we can implement diversity, inclusivity, equity, what can we do in terms of hiring to make sure we remain as inclusive as possible?
Yeah, to keep it really short, I could talk about this for an hour, but one hiring strategy I believe everyone should have in place. If you don't have it already, just do it. And to summarize it, make sure you have a structured process and make sure you involve 4 things. First one off, might sound super basic, but a lot of companies miss it. Have a clear role description. Like, make sure what you're looking for. If you don't know what you're looking for, you're probably not going to find it, and you will probably be biased. You will make your decision on your gut feeling. Not good. So make sure you have a clear role description when you start off, because it's often there you fail in your recruitment process. Secondly, instead of looking at the CV, the first thing you do, you see a lot of companies, or most of our companies, I think I can probably say they do this, and it's using assessment, use logic reasoning and personality assessments. And why? It's because it's the methods that actually has the highest validity when it comes to predicting work performance. So it's not just like we test candidates because we think it's fun. It's because it will hopefully minimize biases, and it will you will be able to compare candidates in a much more objective way. And the 2 final things before we have to wrap up, I would say make sure you involve structured interviews. Basically ask the same type of question to each and every candidate, because if you don't do that, you won't be able to benchmark them. And lastly, use work sample tests. Same thing here. if you use work sample test, you will be able to get an insight into, okay, what type of traits and the skills would a candidate actually bring into the company, and how do they solve problems, for example. So role description, assessments, structured interviews, and work sample test. If you have that in place, you have definitely done the first steps into trying to minimize your unconscious bias if you look at your hiring strategy.
And we do actually have a video with you on this exact topic. So if you want to dive deeper into unbiased recruitment, for examples, tests, etc., we will definitely link that in an email soon. So just, I know this last question is also something you could talk about for hours, and it might be a little bit hard to scratch the surface on, but I just wanted to throw it out there. How do we ensure that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives are deeply rooted in our organizational culture, and to ensure that we not fall into the trap of it being something that we show on the job ad and it turns out to be an empty promise?
Yeah, we've been talking about it before, but first things first, like look at what behaviors drives your values. If you have behaviors that do not like help you create an environment that helps you work with diversity and inclusion, for example, then you maybe need to like go back and evaluate your like value proposition again, because you really need to make sure that you promote a certain type of behavior that actually helps you with these type of things. And also it's a practical example that Spotify is doing that is very concrete fun, and I think you also get started pretty easily is to have like a flexible holiday program. So instead of like having say you have a business in Sweden, you only have the red like Christian holidays. Instead, like the employees can pick, and they can choose based on their beliefs, for example, when they want to take like holidays, like red days, public holidays off. So I think that's also a great example of like hands-on things you can actually start doing.
Yeah, I really like that, because it's, when we look at diversity and inclusion, it's very hard to grasp sometimes, and it's hard to like, where is the starting point? Where do we start? So I think concrete examples are super valuable and a great way to start implementing it. And it obviously has to penetrate the entire organization and be rooted in our values and make sure that we actually live our values. But that's definitely a great starting point. So let's see. We don't unfortunately have time for a Q&A. So we're gonna send out a question afterwards instead, to make sure. I saw that we had one question that came in before. So yeah, we will answer them, but afterwards. So yeah, to not waste any of your time, because I know you also have a busy schedule today. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and obviously thank you for sharing your knowledge and your insights on these 5 key trends and how HR managers can utilize these in the upcoming year. So I hope everyone had a great day, and I'll see you in an upcoming webinar.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye everyone.
Bye.